Round 7. Difficulty. Platformers have a huge history of being difficult and at the same time a history of being too easy. Many of the greatest games of all time were never known for being too easy because most people remember their favorite games of all time to provide the greatest challenge to the player. That's the key word here, challenge. How many obstacles can you survive? How hard is it to complete the game? And at times, how rewarding is it to complete the challenge that the game provides? And nowadays, games doesn't provide that much challenge like in the old days, so telling what's difficult and what isn't is all about the person's preference of gaming skills. I like challenging games, but only if it offers fair challenge, unlike Jak 2. But if the game is too easy to beat, I can't see myself going back and feel rewarded to play it again. So in this round, we will see what is the easiest game to beat out of this competition. Let's start with the Sly Collection. Rather than talking about each of these games in this collection to be harder than the other, the challenging thing about these games as a whole is to not get caught or security gets on your ass. But to be honest, the stealth elements is not the best that we've seen in gaming, which is a little too easy to get past through enemies at times. But I can argue that some of the mini-games are much more difficult than the adventure itself. I enjoy the mini-games and at times find myself smiling at the creativity that Sucker Punch has provided, minus the fact of the move controls mini-games that are new to the series that are not as much fun. In Sonic Colors, like all the Sonic games, the faster you go, the harder it is to control. It never was really easy to keep Sonic in high speed from hitting anything, but at times when there's nothing in Sonic's path, when in top speed, it feels like a breeze. When the gameplay in Sonic Colors is in 3D, it's sorta easy to get past through enemies, but in the 2D levels, prepare yourself for the toughest challenge yet. But to add more features to the gameplay, Sonic has his pals called the Colors, which transforms Sonic to new separate power-ups, which really adds the fun factor of the game. There's no possible way that Super Mario Galaxy is easy because this game provided some of the most challenging platformer in this generation of gaming. Let's be honest here, it's difficult to say which Mario Galaxy is harder and more challenging than the other because the mistakes I've made in the second Mario Galaxy remains the same as the first one. Miscalculating jumps in platforming, running out of time, pushed off the landscape into the black hole, and not collecting enough purple coins in the bonus stages, it's all the same in Mario Galaxy 2 when playing Mario alone. With the addition of Yoshi, it's a bit fast-paced when Yoshi eats the red hot pepper where he runs as fast as hell, in which to me is the best part of Mario Galaxy 2. For Epic Mickey, it is indeed challenging. Basically, since this 3D platformer has an RPG-like adventure, it has the same frustrations like all the other game with an RPG adventure, meaning that there's a lot of exploration you have to make in finding quests and accomplishing those quests in backtracking. When people made that nitpick saying that the 2D levels are too short, it needs to be short because we don't need the game to be longer than it already is because you will need to go through a lot of backtracking between levels at some point of the game. The challenge in platforming, getting used to the new power-ups and upgrades, the quests you have to accomplish, and more are sometimes frustrating. But all of that is not the most frustrating thing about the game. The biggest frustrating thing about the game is the combat system, or in other words, trying to take out your enemy. You can't simply jump on enemies' heads, give them a spin attack, or any other basic attacks like other platformers. Basically, you have to use your paint ability to weaken them, and at times to use it to destroy them. It's frustrating because you have to rely aiming your Wii remote throughout and place Mickey into the direction without having anything in Mickey's way. Compared to other platformers out there, it's far from having the best battling mechanics for a platformer. I wouldn't have such a problem with this game if the enemies weren't so hard to kill, and to make it all worse is the camera control. To me, Donkey Kong Country Returns is the most difficult and challenging platformer that came out in 2010. The beginning is genuinely easy, as the game is warming you up for the ultimate challenge that is later to come out in the game. Check out any level after World 1, you'll die at least twice or more, even with the additional health. Even with the additional health, it is not enough to keep you alive through the end of each level. Not to mention that there's a lot of things that can give you instant deaths, such as the most disappointing part of the game, the water. I'm not trying to act spoiled, but Retro Studios really fucked it up when taking the water levels out of the DK series, and DK simply dies after touching a body of water. Why am I making this complaint? Because the Donkey Kong Country series has offered some of the best water levels in video games, period. I'm not saying that DKCR is an utter disappointment because of this, but I really miss seeing monkeys breathing underwater, and listening to aquatic ambience in levels such as this is not the same. This wouldn't be such a problem if the game isn't so heavily focused on nostalgia, which they're already doing, and of which are missing a lot of nostalgia in it. Taking the water levels out seems rushed, as it was reported that Retro Studios was working on them. Despite saying that any of these levels are frustrating, I find this issue frustrating onto itself. Instead of talking about what is needed in DKCR, there is one thing that shouldn't be included in the series, and that is the Super Guide. What is the Super Guide, you may ask? It's when you keep dying many times, the game asks you if you want to pass through the level by letting the CPU play the level for you. I repeat, letting the CPU play the level for you. That is the ultimate flaw I have with this game, because Nintendo is making the series easier than ever before, and the DK games are never known for being easy at all. The Super Guide is the one thing that destroys the challenge in the game. I don't care if you find any of the levels frustrating as hell, it's pushing your way out of the challenge, and it feels like you're watching someone else playing the game. I wouldn't have such a problem with it if the pig isn't tempting me to do so every fucking time I die in the game. I mean, isn't the items in Cranky's shop helpful enough? I mean, what's the point of playing a game if you're gonna have the game beat itself? Overall, DKCR is one of the most challenging games of 2010, but they don't challenge the player enough in my opinion. Despite going on and on about how frustrating and difficult that I find in each of these games, it should come as no surprise though of what is the easiest game that came out in 2010, and that is Kirby's Epic Yarn. Let's be clear here, it was fun seeing the clever and innovative level designs in the game, but it's almost impossible to die in this game. Literally, almost impossible to die in this game. You can argue that this game was just made for kids, but that's wrong because the past Kirby games I've played, even as a kid, was the perfect challenge for younger players. And in those games, they have plenty of trial and error, and at the same time, it's really easy to pick up and play. Here, knowing that you can't die almost feels like an adventure game, where all you do is explore the world made of yarn and transform into the world was fun, but not challenging or difficult. Even some of the puzzles were elementary to solve. It was artistic to watch, but not exciting to journey on your adventure knowing that you can't die. Even in co-op, other 2D and 2.5D platformers where the character is off screen, he or she dies until they're viewable to the player. But here in Kirby's Epic Yarn, if any of the characters in co-op gets off screen, they immediately fly to the character who's leading the game. The only challenging thing about this game is collecting a certain number of beads and completing the level. But that again, good at gaming or not, you're going to beat this game if you're willing to play through it from beginning to end. I'm not saying that easy games suck, because Kirby's Epic Yarn is indeed one of the Wii's best games of 2010, but like I said, rules are rules. So the one eliminated? Kirby's Epic Yarn. Round 8, Creativity. While other games today plays and looks more or less the same, there's no way anyone can say platformers plays or looks the same because each of them has provided something different in which many people has greatly underestimated platformers. Each of them is incredibly imaginative and at the same time doesn't provide enough imagination to excite the players. This round is really tough for me because I've already eliminated a lot of platformers in this competition that doesn't have that much creativity, and the ones that are still in the competition has a lot of creativity in them. You see how hard it really is to judge these games based on their creativity? All these games you're looking at right now has their own level of creativity, and in this situation, judging a game on its creativity is like judging which art is more artistic than the other. Well, since we made it this far, I'm going to use my opinions to judge which game is more creative than the other. Even though I ranted again and again about Super Mario Galaxy 2, there's still that magical feel that you get every time you play either one of the Mario Galaxies. Yes, they did recycle the same gravity pool levels, bonus levels, giant buttons to press, and so much more, which are incredibly amazing to look at in 2007. Here in 2010, even though it's recycled, no other platformers has ever tried to approach the series' creativity, nor did it come close to rip it off since Mario Galaxy 1. Tell me, what games do you know before and after Super Mario Galaxy that uses planets and gravity as its own platforming? Okay, you got me. Ratchet & Clank did it first. In Epic Mickey, it's extremely creative, using scenes from past Disney classics into levels, and at times recreated them to be very dark levels. It's almost as if Disneyland has turned evil, filled with so many tragic characters. I am disappointed that not all the popular characters in Disney were not used properly in Epic Mickey, but I am grateful that the unknown characters like Oswald the Lucky Rabbit plays a big part in this game to show all of us that there's more to Disney than Goofy, Donald, and such, but rather discover what we missed in the history of Disney. And to top it all down is the interactive world Mickey can do with his paintbrush, which in itself is highly creative, and I would like to see more video games to have more interactions in appearing and reappearing objects than Epic Mickey, but that again, the combat system needs improvements. In Sonic Colors, I just can't help but to admire the theme that Sega has put in this installment of the Sonic series. A techno-space-like world to travel in full speed was all magical. I also like his color friends, who can transform Sonic into a cyber hedgehog, which powers him up into a more powerful transformation. I won't ask more from Sega. Most people like to suck their thumbs and say the 3D Sonic games needs to be more like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. I disagree there, even though Sonic Adventure is my favorite 3D Sonic game, but Sega needs to put out new and good ideas for the Sonic series in order for it to be memorable. And this is one of them. The transition to 2D and 3D platform gameplay was just wonderful, and it felt like it was done right. Even though I ranted about Donkey Kong Country Returns in the last round, I won't deny that the level designs and the challenge are really creative at times. Since they didn't offer the Kremlins from the past DK games, which by the way, I really question Nintendo if they ever like King K. Rool and his minions or not because they didn't feature any of them after Donkey Kong 64. But they did feature some new stuff that I haven't quite seen in platformers before. Let's be honest, the first part of the game was uncreative. Looking at some of these tiresome birds in World 1 was like, was this what I was waiting for 10 years? Then the game starts to pick itself up with the intensity, so many things crashing into pieces, and the jungle feel adventure that you don't get every day in gaming. From the giant tsunami waves coming after you, to the barrel rocket stages, artistic levels, and so much more, was indeed creative. Minus the fact that the enemies are nowhere near as memorable as the Kremlins, and the stupid feature of putting the super guide was unnecessary. I know that some of you were expecting the Sly Collection to be eliminated in this round, because it's a compilation game, and it's nothing really anything new to offer on the table, but does that mean it's uncreative? To be honest, no. Old games can still be creative today, in which modern gamers today fails to understand. If a game or series started something new and different years ago and was considered creative upon its release, it is still creative today. Mixing stealth and platformer in the Sly series was always different amongst all other platform games. It really does feel chilling to stay out of enemy sight and use your skills to overcome the obstacles ahead of you. Returning to these games reminded me of why I was a Sly fan to begin with. Usually this is the part of the round where if I haven't mentioned the game, it's ready to be eliminated and I have to give you the reasons why. But I talked about all the games that are still standing in this competition because all these games are creative, which really did satisfy me. It's so hard to decide which game is creative or uncreative. Even though some of them were recycled, would have been done better, or go a little in depth with the gameplay, you have to admit that they're all different from each other. Heck, even the games that I eliminated in this Platinum Platformer Awards, despite my complaints, are worthy enough to be considered creative. But if I have to choose the one that is still in the competition, which I consider the least creative, I would have to say Sonic Colors. Don't get me wrong, I certainly enjoyed this game, considered it to be the best platformer for the Wii this year, and I like this game a lot, and I don't have as many problems with it. But judging the game's creativity, which I do admire, it's kind of been done before. I can name a couple of games that use the same theme as Sonic Colors, and there's another game that came out this year that used the same theme, and that is Tron Evolution. And Sonic in Space isn't exactly the first time we've seen this before. I'm not trying to bash the game, but let's be honest, the Sonic series never really exceeded creativity, and I don't think it's enough to call it original. So the one eliminated? Sonic Colors.